I was formed in a certain crucible. My school really was the streets of New York City. My frame of reference was George Washington and John Wayne. And you are formed by what you see, the choices you have to make, and the way you discover what it means to be black in New York.
James Baldwin, New York City, Black history. Three totally separate entities that all have a lot in common. Yahoo News looks at one of James Baldwin's literary pieces, If Beale Street Could Talk, and uncovers what has changed and what has stayed the same. I'm Marquise Francis. Let's check it out.
I always say that Uncle Jimmy was your favorite writer's favorite writer. For me, he was my uncle, and I knew him as a son, a brother, a father figure to his siblings, first and foremost. For others, I just always recommend read James Baldwin and discover who he was to you. I think Uncle Jimmy was able to articulate a lot of things that people are frustrated with right now. Uncle Jimmy is famous for saying that when asked how did it feel being born black, poor, and gay, he said he hit the jackpot.
If Beale Street Could Talk is a novel that was written by James Baldwin in 1974. It's a timeless New York love story about Tish and Fonnie, a young couple from Harlem, who together forge an unbreakable bond in the face of an unforgiving and racially biased world. When the book was published, its words spoke to the audience in a way that many novels hadn't before. It encouraged black people in a time of hardships to fight for equality. While Baldwin penned this story decades ago, the legacy of this tale is still relevant on the streets of the Harlem that exists right now.
Harlem is holy grounds. It's the capital of Black America. It's been that way for a long period of time. Harlem is more than just a location. Harlem also served as a Greek chorus of the times. So in many ways, I feel like Harlem had a voice that was just as strong as the characters in his books.
One of 2018's biggest Hollywood hits was an adaptation of James Baldwin's If Beale Street Could Talk. Shot right on the streets of New York City in areas where Baldwin walked and frequented, the movie has brought Baldwin's work back into a modern-day perspective, as well as garnering actress Regina King an Oscar for her performance as Tish's mother, Sharon.
Getting ready for this film, If Beale Street Could Talk with James Baldwin, what were some of your challenges?
The challenge is more trying to obviously recreate the 70s New York. I'm trying to counter the vision of the book against what's actually here. There's not a lot of stuff that's really left from what the 70s was. The 70s, the city was burnt out. There weren't green trees. So a lot of even the first thing was, let's think about places that don't have trees. And that's the New York that Baldwin knew and kind of wrote about.
And I look at Harlem, which I really know. I know it like I know my hand. And it is much worse there today than it was when I was growing up.
In the whole book, Harlem is their place of hope, is the place where it's this big, expansive universe where anything is possible, and they're the safest in that part of the world.
One of the bars used for a scene in the movie was Showman's Jazz Club. It was important to the spirit of the novel to include places and locations that brought old Harlem to life again through the film.
The Harlem music scene has been very, very dominant. The major jazz musicians have played here. This club has helped build a tradition for years, and it's good for the young people to see how important that the tradition has kept going.
We're all like a family, a big family.
And you have all these beautiful pictures of all the musicians that have probably come through here. Why is it important to play here?
Because it's a jazz club. This is an original, Showman's was an original jazz club since 1942 that was established by the Apollo. And most of these musicians up there would be going into Showman's on their break.
And what did it mean for you to have If Beale Street Could Talk film in here?
Oh, it was fantastic. Especially the owner, he was like ecstatic, for Showman's to be chosen for such an important event.
And I feel like it kind of exemplified, you know, a lot of Harlem has changed, a lot is very different, but for whatever reason, Showman's has been able to kind of keep up that tradition.
We're just keeping up the tradition of making sure that it's Harlem musicians. We get a lot of outside musicians also, but not as much as we try to keep it in Harlem.
So James Baldwin, I feel like, was very intentional in picking Harlem in the West and the West Village for his settings. And obviously being down here right now in the West Village, how do you feel like those two settings kind of coexisted and represented what Baldwin was all about?
And kind of playing with, you know, Harlem and you know, the West Village, you're getting a little bit of taste of the different cultures that are kind of here. Not just like, you know, Hispanic, Black, you know, all these different things, but just the culture of New York. I knew when I read this book, and I read the book before I read the script, when I found out that it was going to be made. And it's one of those projects for me that I knew I had to be a part of because of what it meant on a personal level, but also what it would mean for people watching it. Just that like camaraderie and connection is a huge part of how New York works in general. You know, you have your spots that you go to, you have your people that you know, that you love, that you know, that you have their backs, and I think that's just, it was the world that Baldwin lived in. Is that's the world that they see, that's the world that they live every day.